There's an aspect to most properties that can provide nearly limitless resources and enjoyment, shelter, and it costs you nothing. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the biological capital that's on your property. The vegetation and wildlife, the trees, the shrubs, all the things that were naturally there when you showed up. You can add these things. You can plant trees, but as they say, trees take a lifetime to grow and an afternoon to take down. And if you have trees on your property, if you have a good amount of vegetation and wildlife on your property, that will provide you with a lot of resources in terms of wildcrafting edibles, hunting, fishing perhaps, and just enjoyment, shelter, microclimates. Vegetation and wildlife is an incredibly important aspect to a property. And when I'm looking for properties, I want to see ideally half or more of the property be in natural areas that don't require any maintenance. Because those areas do so much for you. As I was saying, you can use them as resources to simply explore, build a tree fort with your kids, hunt, trap, fish, collecting wild edibles, mushrooms, wild berries, you name it. There's so many things that having a natural part of your property will give you, and particularly in our case, it gives us a ton of privacy because it keeps us sheltered. It just gives us a privacy from sheltering our visibility. And so because our acreage is fairly large, it's 40 acres, 3/4 of it is in trees and natural areas that we're not actively using. It gives us a lot of buffer between our neighbors, which also have larger acreages as well, but it gives us that buffer nonetheless. And I've often said that when it comes to homesteading, really 5 acres is all you need to establish the primary infrastructure, the main growing areas, animal pens, barns, sheds, workshops, what have you. 5 acres is usually enough, of course, depending on your topography. Mine is a bit challenging, but I still have enough. But 5 acres is enough to get you the space for everything you need. So if you have 100 acres, you really only need 5 acres. And if you want to do crop farming and things like that, then we're talking about something else. But in regards to homesteading, growing all the food you need, having all of the resources that you need on a daily basis there for you, 5 acres is enough. So if you've got 100 acres, you really only need 5 of those acres to be the controlled, productive, call them the zones 1 and 2 of your property. The rest, in my opinion, it's ideal to have the rest as wild. Now, that generally means that if you want a good amount of area on your property to be wild, it generally means you're going to look for larger acreages. And that's okay. I prefer larger acreages. I like the space, the personal space. Yes, they can cost more. And often, if they don't cost more, it's because they have a lack of resources. And that was actually the exact case with my property. This property, 40 acres it's 40 acres, and 30 acres is of just trees and forests, and some ponds and some really nice areas that we can just enjoy. I like that ratio, but you have to have a larger acreage. So when you're looking at 10 acres, unless it's 10 acres that's all very usable and you don't have topography like I do, it's possible to have, maybe in this case you might have 6 acres that is wild, and the other 4 acres is your primary homestead area. that you're going to spend most of your time developing. But in regards to homesteads, evaluating the vegetation and wildlife is very important. And there are some properties that just have it and some that just don't. It's not necessarily a make or break thing. It just depends on your context. It depends where you are, of course, and it depends what you want. And for myself, it's always been a high priority. I grew up working in the forests of British Columbia. I like having trees. I like the shade that trees give. I like the protection of the soil they give. I like the privacy they give. And I also like the firewood. And that's a really good thing about, I mean, even the forest we're in Douglas fir country here. And these forests have seasonal burns. And so they're very vulnerable to burning. And because of that, if I want to be a good steward on this land and make sure that I'm less susceptible to fire risk, it's a good idea to go in and thin the forest. And actually at this time of the year, when we're right into the snow melt, on late March as I record this, you can see how just snaggy and nasty it is on the inside of my forest. And I'll show you here in a second. It's really illustrated at this time of the year because there's no other foliage and all the deciduous plants on the ground are just kind of, they're thin, so you can really see through. And you can see how much thinning out one could do in there to reduce the amount of flammable material. And that's a good thing because that's also firewood for you. And most forests in North America are too thick. If you do good land stewardship, good silviculture, you can take down enough firewood every year for your family and it'll regenerate quicker by the time you run out. Of course, all that depends on the size of your land, but it's certainly the situation in the case of my land. So on 40 acres, I could cut down, I mean, at the very least 10 cords of burnable firewood per year, and we wouldn't notice any downside to that, in that all it would do is create more space for some of the more established trees to get bigger, take out the snags, take out the tinder, and create more breathing room in the forest, which there's a lot of ecological benefits for that. And there's a lot of people in my area who actually do really good selective logging. And one of my neighbors actually has been logging 160 acre quarter section for about 30 years. And when you go over to his place, you can't tell anything's been logged. The trees are perfectly spaced. His forest is so much cleaner than mine. There's no risks. There's no tinder in there that's easy risk for burns. He's managed his forest and got a resource out of it at the same time. And that's one of the greatest advantages of having a lot of trees on your property. And so as we have been evaluating these scales of permanence based on a framework I've been discussing, coming from a course called Finding the Perfect Homestead Property that we have developed over the winter, as we go through these, this is a really important one. However, this one doesn't quite have as much weight in its effect on your immediate well-being as the other four we discussed prior to this. The first four being climate, geography, water, and socioeconomics. Those four have the most weight. Last time we talked about access and circulation, and that's important as well, but neither access and circulation nor vegetation and wildlife have the same weight as the first four, but they are important and they do need to be recognized. But again, a motto that I've followed for many years when I'm looking at properties and I just think about the value of trees, I just think about that old saying that they take a lifetime to grow and an afternoon to take down. So the kinds of properties that I prefer when I'm looking for homestead properties, I've said this in some previous videos of these as well, is that I prefer recreational type properties. Properties that aren't necessarily developed for farm infrastructure. Sometimes they have fields on them, but I generally prefer properties that have established trees than not, because they're so much harder to get back. And trees are so important for so many different reasons, and just the fact that you can have different types of microclimates on your property as a result. And that's a place where these scales of permanence will intersect. And good geography and good water can lead to good vegetation and wildlife, and you can think about it in all kinds of other different types of ways, but they all help each other in one way or another. Vegetation and wildlife is absolutely critical. So if you guys are enjoying this video series, I would encourage you to check out the course that we have built, Finding the Perfect Homestead Property. I've talked about it a lot in the last videos, but I know this is going to help a lot of people. So if you're interested, head over to homestead.freedomfarmers.com, sign up for the waiting list, and very shortly we'll send you some more information about the course, our early bird pricing, and our main release date. All right, folks, if you found this video helpful, smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one.